This ancient jar was sealed before the pyramids were even a memory, inside an archaeologist's tent under the harsh desert sun. The air crackled with a tension you could almost touch. A single artifact, perfectly preserved, held a secret locked away for thousands of years. We are about to crack that seal and reveal the jar's impossible contents, a discovery that will force us to rewrite a chapter of ancient history. What mysterious substance did the Egyptians consider so powerful it needed to be sealed for eternity? And why was its very existence considered impossible? What do you believe is the greatest secret still hidden by the ancient world? The crack of a pickaxe against stone echoed through a dry valley far from the royal pyramids. It was the spring of 1923, and a team led by a determined archaeologist named Howard Carter was excavating a seemingly modest site, a cluster of tombs intended for the artisans who built the grand monuments. The initial excitement of the season had faded into the grueling routine of shifting sand and rock. Then, one of the local workmen, his hands caked in dust, unearthed something smooth and perfectly round. The air, once heavy with heat, suddenly felt electric. They had found it not in a pharaoh's treasure chamber, but nestled in the corner of a humble craftsman's burial, a place meant for the afterlife of a common person. The jar itself was carved from a single piece of pale alabaster, its surface cool to the touch even under the relentless sun. It stood about as tall as a man's forearm, with a slight, elegant curve to its body. There were no lavish gold inlays or complex scenes of gods, just a few simple, deeply carved hieroglyphs near its base spelling a protective incantation. But the true marvel was the lid. It was sealed shut with a thick, dark resin, a mixture of bitumen and clay, stamped with the symbol of a coiled serpent. This was no accidental closure. This was a deliberate, ritualistic act. The unbroken seal was a promise, a silent vow from the past that whatever lay within had been untouched, protected, and deemed important enough to remain hidden for millennia. That unbroken serpent seal was far more than a simple lock. In the world of ancient Egypt, a seal was a sacred boundary, a line drawn in the sand between our realm and the divine. It was a magical ward, meticulously applied to protect the contents not from thieves, but from spiritual corruption and the decay of time itself. Think of it not as a security measure, but as a prayer made physical, a permanent enchantment meant to last for all eternity. The Egyptians used a variety of methods to create these powerful barriers. A simple clay stamp pressed into wet mud could mark a jar of grain for a commoner's tomb. But for something as significant as our alabaster jar, the seal would have been complex, often involving cords bound in intricate patterns and sealed with that dense black resin. This resin itself was potent, a substance associated with the gods and the mummification process, believed to have purifying and protective properties. To break such a seal was not a mere act of curiosity, it was a profound transgression. In the context of the afterlife, a broken seal meant the magical protection had failed. The contents were now vulnerable, their spiritual essence exposed, and their purpose in the journey to the next world potentially voided. This is the immense weight that rested on Howard Carter's shoulders as he prepared to breach that ancient barrier. He was not just opening a jar, he was dismantling a 4,000-year-old spell. The team gathered around the simple wooden table in the tent, their faces illuminated by a single bright lamp. Howard Carter was not alone in this delicate task. He was joined by a chemist from the British Museum and a senior conservator, their expertise as crucial as his own archaeological instinct. This was not a job for force, but for patience and precision. The tools laid out on a clean cloth were not the heavy picks of excavation, but a surgeon's kit. There were delicate scalpels with blades fine enough to slice a hair, soft bristled brushes, and small bottles of specially formulated solvents designed to gently soften ancient resins without damaging the jar itself. A large magnifying glass on a stand was positioned over the serpent seal, its lens revealing every minute crack and bubble in the 4,000-year-old pitch. The desire to finally know what secret the jar held was a physical pressure in the quiet air, but it was balanced by a profound, almost reverent fear. One wrong move, one slip of a blade, and they could shatter the alabaster, contaminate the contents, or simply destroy the context that made the discovery meaningful. They were not treasure hunters, they were custodians of a fragile thread connecting two worlds. Every breath felt measured, every movement deliberate, as the conservator's gloved hand steadied itself, the scalpel poised above the dark, unyielding seal. The moment of truth had arrived, not with a dramatic smash, but with the whisper-thin edge of modern science preparing to meet an ancient magical ward. What would they find once that protective barrier was finally breached? The scalpel hovered, a sliver of steel holding back 4,000 years of expectation. Before that blade could even touch the resin, the minds of everyone in that tent were already racing with possibilities, each one grounded in everything we know about ancient Egyptian burial practices. The most logical assumption, the one whispered first, was grain. Sealed jars of wheat or barley were common offerings, meant to sustain the soul in the afterlife with the most fundamental nourishment. Or perhaps it held something far more luxurious, a precious oil or perfume. The Egyptians were master perfumers, and a sealed alabaster vessel was the perfect container to preserve the delicate scent of lotus or frankincense, a fragrant pleasure for eternity. Then there was the more solemn possibility. In royal tombs, organs removed during mummification were stored in special jars called canopic jars, each topped with a god's head and dedicated to protecting a specific part of the body. But this jar was from a commoner's tomb, and its seal was different, more symbolic than functional for such a grim purpose. The final, thrilling guess was knowledge. Could it be a tightly rolled papyrus scroll, perhaps a lost book of spells or a secret map to a forgotten part of the necropolis? These were all reasonable, educated guesses, the kind of finds that would have been celebrated and neatly catalogued. They were preparing for a fascinating confirmation of what they already knew. They had no idea they were about to confront something that defied all of it. The first crack in the resin was a sound like ancient bones breaking. A fine line appeared across the serpent symbol, and a collective breath was held. The scalpel worked its way around the rim with painstaking slowness, the dark, brittle seal yielding not in chunks, but as a fine, black powder that dusted the white cloth beneath. The air in the tent grew thick, not just with heat, but with a palpable, nervous energy. Finally, after what felt like an age, the last of the adhesive gave way. Carter, his hands steadied by a lifetime of discipline, gently gripped the alabaster lid. It lifted with a soft, sucking sigh, a release of pressure that had been building for 40 centuries. All eyes were fixed on the opening. The first thing that struck them was not a sight, but a smell. It was faint, yet unmistakable, a dry, earthy scent like ancient papyrus and crushed herbs with an almost spicy, medicinal undertone. It was the smell of time itself, released from its prison. Leaning forward, Carter angled the lamp to peer inside. The contents were not golden, not liquid, not the expected grain. The jar was filled nearly to the brim with a dense, granular substance, a deep, reddish-brown powder the color of dried blood or rich, iron-laden soil. It was utterly uniform, with a fine, almost silky texture that shifted slightly under the light. This was no ordinary offering. This was something completely unknown, a substance that defied every immediate classification and filled the silent tent with a new, even deeper mystery. That deep red powder defied every initial guess. It was clearly a solid, but its texture was unlike anything they had encountered. A fine, granular substance that flowed like dry sand yet felt strangely heavy for its volume. The initial wave of confusion in the tent was palpable, a silent, shared disbelief that quickly broke into a torrent of hushed, rapid-fire theories. One of the archaeologists insisted it must be a rare, pulverized mineral pigment, perhaps a form of ochre used for sacred wall paintings. The chemist immediately countered, suggesting its consistency was more organic, possibly some form of desiccated resin or a spice that had completely lost its scent over the millennia. Could it be the remains of a food offering, a grain like emmer wheat that had decomposed into this uniform, unrecognizable state? Each new idea was proposed and just as quickly met with a skeptical frown or a counterpoint, the experts circling the mystery without any clear answer. This was the critical moment where speculation had to yield to science. With meticulous care, using a small, sterile spatula, the chemist collected 2 tiny samples from different depths within the jar. One was sealed in a clear glass vial to preserve its physical state, while the other was carefully placed into a small, dark container to protect it from light. These samples weren't going to be examined under a simple magnifying glass. They were destined for a laboratory, for instruments that could peer into the very atomic structure of the material. The discovery was no longer just an artifact, it was a question, and science was the only way to find the answer. The wait for those results would feel like an eternity, holding the key to a secret the ancient Egyptians had guarded for 4,000 years. The strange red powder left the desert and entered a world of sterile white laboratories, where the mystery would be attacked not with picks and brushes, but with some of the most advanced scientific instruments ever created. The first and most crucial tool was a machine with a nearly unpronounceable name, gas chromatography mass spectrometry, or GCMS for short. Think of it as a molecular detective. The process begins by dissolving a tiny, almost invisible speck of the powder in a solvent. This solution is then vaporized and pushed by an inert gas through an incredibly long coiled column. As the vapor travels, the different chemical compounds within it begin to separate, each one moving at its own unique speed based on its weight and structure. It is a molecular race, and the lighter compounds cross the finish line first. But the real magic happens next. As each separated compound exits the column, it is bombarded by a beam of electrons which shatter it into a predictable pattern of fragments. This fragmentation pattern is like a chemical fingerprint. The mass spectrometer weighs these fragments, and a computer compares the resulting fingerprint to a massive library of known substances. It is not a visual identification, it is a process of reading the substance's most fundamental identity, its atomic signature. This single machine could reveal if the powder was a spice, a resin, a medicine, or something else entirely. But the scientists did not stop there. They turned to microscopes thousands of times more powerful than the one in Carter's tent. Scanning electron microscopy revealed the powder's physical structure in breathtaking detail, showing whether it was crystalline, fibrous, or comprised of crushed plant cells. They used DNA sequencing, attempting to extract and read any minuscule genetic traces that might have survived, hoping to identify a specific plant or animal. Finally, a small sample was sent for radiocarbon dating, a process that measures the steady decay of radioactive carbon atoms in any once living material. This would give them the final, incontrovertible date, confirming that the substance was indeed as ancient as the tomb itself and not a later contamination. All these tests worked in concert, each one answering a different piece of the puzzle, slowly building a complete picture from a pile of enigmatic red dust. What story would these silent, precise machines finally tell? The first results from the gas chromatograph were not just surprising, they were revolutionary. The dominant chemical signature identified in the powder was a complex organic compound known as salicylic acid. Now you might recognize that name. Salicylic acid is the active ingredient in modern aspirin, a foundational medicine used worldwide to reduce pain, fever, and inflammation. But this was not a lab-synthesized pill. This was the pure, concentrated chemical extracted from nature and sealed in a jar 4,000 years ago. The presence of this specific compound was utterly baffling to the research team. While we have ancient texts like the Ebers Papyrus that describe using willow bark tea to alleviate pain, those are simple herbal preparations. This jar did not contain ground-up willow bark. The scientific analysis revealed an almost purified form of the active ingredient itself, a substance that requires a sophisticated understanding of chemistry to isolate. How did the artisans of ancient Egypt achieve such a feat? This was not folk medicine. This was pharmaceutical science, a level of technological advancement that historians never believed existed in that era. Finding a common painkiller would have been expected. Finding its purified, scientific heart locked away in a commoner's tomb was like discovering a microchip in a medieval castle. It simply did not belong, and its existence there challenged the very timeline of human innovation. But the chemical analysis was only half the story. As the team delved deeper with their powerful microscopes, they uncovered a second, even more bewildering layer to the mystery. Embedded within the fine red powder were microscopic traces of biological material, perfectly preserved by the jar's hermetic seal. They found fossilized pollen grains, but not from any plant native to the Nile Valley. The shape and structure were unmistakable, identifying it as pollen from a species of birch tree, a tree that thrives in cold northern climates and was completely absent from ancient Egypt. How did pollen from a Scandinavian tree end up sealed in an Egyptian tomb? The plot thickened further with the discovery of fungal spores, identified as belonging to a specific genus of mold known for its potent antibiotic properties. This was not a random contaminant. This was evidence of a deliberate recipe. Think about what this means. The jar did not contain one miracle substance, but a complex mixture, a sophisticated blend of a purified painkiller, an antibiotic mold, and an imported botanical ingredient. This was not a simple herbal remedy you could whip up in a clay pot. This was a multi-component medicine, a pharmaceutical cocktail designed to target multiple ailments at once: pain, infection, and inflammation. The presence of the birch pollen is the most tantalizing clue. Certain compounds in birch bark are precursors to salicylic acid, the very chemical they had already identified. This suggests the ancient chemists weren't just using local plants. They were sourcing specific ingredients from across the known world to create a more potent, refined product. They were not mere herb gatherers, they were early bioprospectors, engaged in a global search for the most effective natural compounds. So what kind of ailment were they trying to cure that required such a powerful, internationally sourced medicine? The answer to that question leads us down an even darker and more surprising path. The laboratory results painted a picture of advanced chemistry, but it was in the quiet halls of museums and libraries that the search for meaning truly began. Researchers turned from their microscopes to the fragile, ancient pages of medical texts like the famed Ebers Papyrus, a sprawling scroll that acts as a detailed guide to Egyptian medicine. They were searching for a recipe, a name, anything that could explain the impossible mixture of painkiller, antibiotic, and foreign pollen. At first, the scrolls seemed to offer only simple remedies, poultices of honey and herbs for wounds, or spells to cast out demonic causes of illness. Then a specific entry caught their attention. It described a powerful remedy referred to as the Great Healer or the Dust of the Gods, a substance used for the most severe and mysterious ailments. The description was cryptic, but key details sent a shock of recognition through the team. The text specified that this dust was a deep red color, had to be prepared by the highest-ranking priest-physicians, and was administered only in the most dire circumstances. It was said to cure the wasting sickness, a condition that brought on raging fevers, deep internal pain, and a slow decline. This sounded less like a common cold and more like a systemic infection or a severe inflammatory disease, precisely the kind of complex illness that would require a multi-targeted medicine like the one in the jar. The papyrus even hinted at its ingredients, mentioning a tear of the northern sky tree and a mold from the sacred bread. descriptions that eerily align with the birch pollen and antibiotic fungus found in the analysis. This was no longer just a chemical compound, it was a named, legendary cure, reserved for the most critical cases and woven into the very fabric of their medical and spiritual practices. This powerful medicine, however, may have been intended for a patient beyond the living. The jar's contents point not just to a physical cure, but to a spiritual one, a magical elixir crafted for the soul's journey. In ancient Egypt, the concept of Heka, or magic, was not superstition. It was a fundamental force of the universe, as real as the Nile River. Heka was the power used by the gods to create the world, and priests learned to wield this same energy to maintain order and repel chaos. Substances were not just chemicals, they were vessels for this divine power. A specific resin, a rare pollen, a potent mold, each could be charged with intention and used in spells, protection amulets, or sacred ceremonies. Think of this not as a pharmacist's formula, but as a priest's toolkit. The purified painkiller might have been meant to soothe the spiritual aches of the afterlife journey, a voyage described as fraught with peril and torment. The antibiotic mold could have served as a ward against the demons of decay and corruption, entities believed to attack the soul just as bacteria attack the body. And the birch pollen, a rare ingredient from a mythical sky tree of the north, could have been the key component to open a channel of communication with a specific god, perhaps a deity of healing or resurrection. This jar, then, may have been the centerpiece of a specific, powerful rite performed for the deceased artisan. It was not merely a medicine to be consumed, but a concentrated source of magical protection, sealed away with the body to act as a permanent guardian against the unimaginable dangers of the underworld. The line between pharmacy and temple was invisible to them because to heal the body was to honor the spirit, and to protect the soul required the most potent substances on earth. What kind of ritual would demand such an impossibly advanced concoction? And what does its presence in a commoner's tomb reveal about the true power of ancient Egyptian magic? This was not a single-purpose remedy, but a sophisticated medical arsenal in a jar. The evidence points to a formula designed to combat a complex array of symptoms, a true ancient cure-all. The purified salicylic acid would have aggressively targeted pain and reduced high fevers, providing immediate relief to a suffering patient. Simultaneously, the antibiotic mold would have waged a silent war against bacterial infection, fighting off the invisible invaders that could cause sepsis or gangrene. The birch pollen, with its own anti-inflammatory properties, could have enhanced the overall effect, creating a synergistic blend that treated the root cause of an illness while managing its debilitating symptoms. This reveals a stunning level of insight from the Egyptian physicians. They understood, perhaps through centuries of careful observation, that some sicknesses were multifaceted, requiring a multi-pronged attack. They were not just treating a headache or a simple wound, they were developing protocols for systemic failures of the body. Compare this to the well-known use of honey on wounds, a practice we now know works because of honey's natural antibacterial properties. The Egyptians observed that it prevented rot and sped healing, so they used it. The jar's contents represent the same empirical logic, but elevated to a breathtaking degree. They identified specific biological agents like the antibiotic mold and understood their power. So what kind of devastating ailment would necessitate such a powerful, broad-spectrum concoction? It could have been a treatment for severe battlefield injuries, preventing infection while managing shock and pain. It might have been a last resort against a deadly plague, something that caused raging fever and painful inflammation throughout the body. Or perhaps it was a surgical anesthetic and antiseptic combined, allowing for complex internal procedures that we never dreamed were possible 4,000 years ago. The existence of this jar forces us to reconsider the entire history of medicine, placing a level of pharmaceutical genius in an age we once thought was dominated by magic and superstition. The real question is not just what was in the jar, but what miraculous recoveries did it make possible? But what if the jar's secret was not medicinal at all? Another compelling theory suggests we have been overcomplicating the mystery. Perhaps this was not a high priest's pharmacy, but a master chef's pantry. Consider the extravagant diet of the Egyptian elite. Pharaohs and nobles dined on duck, lamb, and ox, often flavored with a sophisticated array of imported spices like coriander, cumin, and cinnamon. They cherished luxurious condiments and fermented delicacies, foods that demonstrated wealth, status, and access to distant trade routes. Could this deep red powder have been a prized culinary ingredient, a forgotten recipe sealed for a king's enjoyment in the afterlife? The fine, granular texture is consistent with a crushed spice blend or a desiccated paste. The reddish hue could point to paprika, saffron, or a mixture of rare herbs. Fermented fish sauces similar to Roman garum were known in the ancient world, and a concentrated, powdered version would have been a potent flavor enhancer. Or imagine a royal wine infusion where precious wine was steeped with fruits, honey, and spices, then reduced over a low fire into a dense, flavorful paste that could be reconstituted with water. For a deceased artisan, being buried with such a luxury would be a profound honor, a taste of the pharaoh's own table to sustain him for eternity. This culinary hypothesis reframes the entire discovery. It transforms the jar from a vessel of magic into a container of pure desire, a final, exquisite meal meant to appeal not to the gods but to the senses. The most radical explanation for the jar's contents is that they do not belong there at all. This theory, known among archaeologists as an out-of-place artifact, suggests we have found something that shatters our established timeline of human progress. According to everything we think we know, the ancient Egyptians should not have possessed the knowledge to purify a single chemical compound like salicylic acid. That level of chemical isolation is a product of the modern era, a process we associate with white lab coats and complex glassware, not with linen-clad priests in sun-baked temples. The presence of the birch pollen deepens this chronological paradox. For that pollen to be in the jar, it implies a trade network or an expedition that reached into northern Europe, lands that were considered mythical if they were known at all in the age of the pyramids. This is akin to finding a single, perfect Coca-Cola bottle sealed inside a Viking longship, a clean, manufactured object in a place it simply could not be. Proponents of this theory argue that the substance in the jar is a relic of a lost knowledge, a fragment of a sophisticated science that existed and then vanished, leaving no other trace in the archaeological record. Perhaps it was the secret of a single, brilliant priest-physician, a genius whose methods died with him. Or more thrillingly, could it be evidence of a contact, however brief, with a different, more advanced culture, one whose own history is entirely lost to us? The jar forces a difficult choice. Do we dismiss it as a bizarre, one-off fluke, or do we allow this single, sealed container to challenge the entire narrative of ancient innovation? To understand the true scale of this discovery, we must place it beside the most famous jars ever unearthed from the sands of Egypt. Think of the glorious alabaster jars from Tutankhamun's tomb, filled with rare, aged wines labeled with the vineyard and the year of the pharaoh's reign. Those were treasures of status and luxury, a king's divine refreshment for the afterlife. Then there are the canopic jars found with countless mummies, their stoppers carved with the heads of protective deities. Their contents, the preserved liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines, were solemn and ritualistic, meant to reassemble the physical body for its spiritual journey. Even the practical storage jars from the workmen's village of Deir el-Medina, which held grain, water, and beer, speak to the simple, daily needs of the community. Every one of these jars, from the most royal to the most common, fits neatly into our understanding of ancient Egyptian life. They contain what we expect them to contain. Our red powder jar shatters that entire pattern. It does not hold wine, organs, or food. It holds a sophisticated scientific formula, a blend of purified medicine and magic that demonstrates an intellectual achievement we never knew existed. This is not a jar of what they ate or who they were, but a jar of what they knew, and that knowledge was far more advanced than anything we have ever found before. While the powder inside captivated scientists, the answer to its purpose may have been written on the outside all along. Etched into the cool alabaster surface just below the rim are two columns of hieroglyphs, simple yet deliberate in their carving. The first is a name, Neferhotep, followed by his title, Overseer of the Royal Artisans. This immediately elevates the jar's status. It belonged to a master craftsman, a man of significant skill and responsibility who directed the workers building the pharaoh's eternal home. But the second column of text is far more mysterious. It reads Sheta en Netta, which translates directly to the secret of the god. This is not a description of the substance, it is a declaration of its nature and power. It tells us that what is inside is not merely a medicine or a spice, but a hidden truth, a piece of divine knowledge made physical. The inscription suggests this was not something Neferhotep invented, but something he was entrusted with, a sacred recipe passed down, perhaps from the god of healing and magic himself, Thoth. It implies the contents were so potent, so revolutionary, that they had to be classified, hidden away under a magical seal to protect both its power and the person who carried it into the next life. This single phrase transforms the jar from a simple container into a classified document, a sealed file containing heaven's own cure. Why would a humble artisan be buried with the secret of a god, and what does that tell us about the true architects of ancient knowledge? The final, unshakable proof came from the radiocarbon dating. Scientists subjected a tiny sample of the red powder to the ultimate test of time, measuring the decay of its radioactive carbon atoms. The result was unequivocal. The substance itself dated to between 2650 and 2590 before the Common Era. This confirmed, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that the powder was created and sealed during the lifetime of Neferhotep, the overseer of the royal artisans. It was not a later addition, not a modern contamination, but authentically ancient. This fact, while confirming the jar's provenance, deepened the mystery exponentially. We are not looking at an anomaly from the age of the pyramids, but from a time even before they were built. This medicine, this secret of the god, existed during Egypt's early dynastic period, a time we often consider the very dawn of their civilization. The purified chemistry, the imported birch pollen, the sophisticated antibiotic recipe, all of it was being practiced over 4,500 years ago. This pushes the timeline of advanced pharmacology back by millennia. It means this knowledge wasn't a late invention of the New Kingdom, but a foundational science, one of the core pillars upon which their society was secretly built. The radiocarbon date is the final, chilling piece of evidence. It proves we have not just underestimated ancient Egyptian technology, we have completely misunderstood the origins of medicine itself. Armed with the precise chemical blueprint from the laboratory, a new team assembled not of archaeologists but of experimental chemists and historians of ancient technology. Their mission was audacious, to reverse engineer the secret of the god using only the materials and methods available to an Egyptian artisan 4,500 years ago. The first challenge was the birch pollen. They sourced it from the cold northern forests it originally called home, a tangible link to the vast, forgotten trade routes of the ancient world. Next, they cultivated the specific antibiotic mold, painstakingly growing it on a substrate of emmer wheat dough, replicating the sacred bread mentioned in the texts. The most difficult part was isolating the salicylic acid. Modern labs use complex solvents and glassware, but the ancient Egyptians had only fire, water, stone mortars, and ceramic pots. The team theorized a method of repeated boiling and reduction, using willow bark and the birch bark, slowly evaporating the liquid over days until a crystalline residue formed. This residue was then ground for hours into the fine, deep red powder they had documented. The final step was the mixing, combining the purified crystals with the powdered mold and the rare pollen in the exact ratios the gas chromatograph had revealed. The result was a small pile of reddish dust, visually identical to the sample from the jar, but the true test was yet to come. Was this merely a convincing replica, or did it actually work? They applied the powder to Petri dishes teeming with modern bacteria, including strains like Staphylococcus. The results were staggering. The recreated powder created a clear zone of inhibition, a perfect circle where the bacteria could not grow. The ancient antibiotic was not just a story, it was functionally potent against a 21st century superbug. They had not just recreated a substance, they had brought a 4,000-year-old medicine back to life, and it was fighting a battle its creators could never have imagined. The scientific confirmation sent shockwaves through academic communities worldwide. A leading Egyptologist from the University of Chicago, a woman who has spent her life translating tomb inscriptions, confessed she was left speechless. She explained that while we knew the Egyptians were brilliant engineers and artists, this discovery reveals a parallel track of sophisticated scientific inquiry. It forces us to reconsider the daily life of a royal artisan like Neferhotep. He wasn't just a stone carver, he was a man who may have had access to a level of healthcare that rivaled, in its own way, anything available for centuries after him. The implications for trade are equally staggering. An analytical chemist from Oxford, holding a printout of the gas chromatography results, pointed to the birch pollen signature. He called it the smoking gun. This single ingredient proves that 4,500 years ago, Egypt was plugged into a global network, exchanging not just gold and luxuries, but knowledge and raw scientific materials. The distance between the Nile and the birch forests of northern Europe is immense, a journey of thousands of miles by land and sea. This was not casual trade, it was a targeted mission for a specific, potent resource. The chemist described the process of isolating salicylic acid with ancient tools as a monumental achievement, a chemical puzzle they solved through sheer, patient experimentation. He compared it to the precision of pyramid construction, but on a molecular scale, an invisible architecture of matter. The experts do not all agree, however. A more conservative historian argues that we must be cautious, that this could be a singular, freakish success, a recipe that worked by accident and was never replicated. But the majority opinion is shifting. The consensus forming in lecture halls and laboratories is that we have only been seeing the grand stone monuments of ancient Egypt. This jar is a window into its quiet, intellectual heart, a world of priest-scientists who understood the healing power of the earth in a way we are only now beginning to measure. What other secrets did they take with them? Secrets we have been digging past for centuries without ever realizing what we were missing. News of the discovery detonated across the globe like a silent shockwave. The quiet, academic press release from the university was instantly swallowed by a roaring digital firestorm. Major headlines screamed with provocative questions. One prominent newspaper led with "Ancient Egyptian superdrug found, rewriting history." Another asked, "Did the pharaohs possess a secret science?" Across social media, the red powder became an instant sensation. Armchair archaeologists and professional historians clashed in endless threads, while meme creators photoshopped the alabaster jar into everything from modern pharmacy shelves to science fiction movies. The public's imagination was electrified not by gold or jewels, but by the sheer intellectual audacity of the find. It was a mystery anyone could grasp, a tangible piece of a past that suddenly seemed smarter, more connected, and far more mysterious than the textbooks ever taught. Why did this particular jar resonate so deeply? Because it was a puzzle that belonged to everyone. It was not a treasure locked away in a museum case, it was an idea. It challenged our collective sense of progress. It asked a thrilling and unsettling question: if we were so wrong about this, what else have we missed? The global conversation spiraled into 1,000 competing theories, from ancient alien contact to lost advanced civilizations, each one a testament to how a single, sealed container had cracked open our perception of history itself. Of course, such a monumental discovery was bound to ignite a firestorm of wild speculation. Almost immediately, fringe theories erupted, suggesting the jar's contents were proof of alien technology, a gift from advanced beings who taught the Egyptians their secret science. Others claimed it was a supernatural artifact, its power drawn from gods or magic we can no longer comprehend. While these ideas are thrilling, the true story revealed by the science is even more profound. Let's take a rational look at the evidence. The gas chromatograph did not detect any unknown elements or futuristic compounds. It identified salicylic acid and birch pollen, substances entirely of this earth. The process of isolating these compounds, while brilliant, was achieved with tools we know they possessed: fire, water, stone grinders, and ceramic pots. This was not alien technology, it was human ingenuity refined to an astonishing degree. Think of it like baking a complex sourdough bread. The process involves cultivating a wild yeast, understanding fermentation, and controlling temperature, a form of biotechnology that seems almost magical if you don't understand the steps. The ancient Egyptians were master bakers of medicine, using patient observation and experimentation to unlock nature's secrets. The presence of the birch pollen doesn't point to interstellar travel, but to something equally revolutionary: a vast and sophisticated trade network. It proves that 4,000 years ago, humanity was already connected, sharing resources and knowledge across continents. This jar is not evidence of a lost super-civilization, but a stunning testament to the one we already knew existed, revealing a hidden layer of intellectual achievement we are only now beginning to appreciate. The real conspiracy is how much we have underestimated our own ancestors. This single jar has fundamentally cracked the foundation of Egyptology. For centuries, the narrative of ancient Egypt has been built on its monumental architecture and its deeply spiritual art, a civilization we admired for its grandeur and its gods. We saw them as brilliant engineers and devout priests, but we never truly saw them as laboratory scientists. This discovery shatters that limited view, forcing a complete reassessment of their intellectual landscape. It is no longer enough to study the pyramids and the tombs. We must now ask, what other secrets were they brewing in their workshops? The existence of a purified pharmaceutical agent means their knowledge of chemistry was not merely practical, like creating pigments for paint or glaze for pottery. It was analytical. They understood how to extract, concentrate, and combine specific bioactive compounds, a process that requires a systematic scientific method. Think of the difference between boiling willow bark for a soothing tea and isolating the precise molecule that makes it work. One is folk tradition, the other is pharmacology. This jar proves the ancient Egyptians were capable of the latter, pushing the dawn of advanced chemistry back by thousands of years. The implications ripple outward, touching every aspect of their society. The royal artisans like Neferhotep were not just laborers, they were likely part of a privileged class with access to a healthcare system far more sophisticated than we ever imagined. Their medical knowledge was not just spells and incantations, it was a validated, potent science. And then there is the birch pollen, a tiny botanical clue with global ramifications. Its presence rewrites the map of the ancient world. We knew Egypt traded for Lebanese cedar and Nubian gold, but this suggests a network that stretched into the cold, northern forests of Europe, a connection previously thought impossible for that era. This was not just trade for luxury goods, it was trade for knowledge, for specific ingredients with proven, powerful effects. The quest for this pollen implies a deliberate, scientific exploration of the natural world, a search for the most effective components from every corner of their known universe. This jar does not just add a new artifact to a museum shelf. It demands we rewrite the chapter on ancient science, recognizing that the Egyptians were not only builders of stone, but architects of medicine. Today, the alabaster jar rests inside a climate-controlled display case at the Grand Egyptian Museum. Its journey from a dusty tomb to a pristine gallery is a story of modern preservation. The jar itself is sealed once more, not with ancient resin, but under a perfect atmosphere of inert nitrogen gas, a scientific shield that halts all decay. Beside it, in a smaller, identical case, lies a single, dramatic vial containing a sample of the deep red powder, a visual testament to the mystery within. This exhibit has become a pilgrimage site for history lovers. Visitors do not rush past it. They linger, peering at the simple hieroglyphs and the faint, dark residue of the original serpent seal, trying to glimpse the secret of the god for themselves. The display is intentionally minimalist, focusing all attention on the artifact with interactive screens near, by offering visitors a deep dive into the chemical analysis and the dramatic story of its discovery. It is no longer just an archaeological find. It is a portal, a single object that invites everyone to question what we think we know about the ancient world and the quiet, brilliant minds that shaped it. From that first crack in the serpent seal to the stunning laboratory results, this single jar has taken us on an incredible journey. We witnessed the careful unsealing, felt the confusion over the strange red powder, and shared in the collective shock as science revealed its impossible truth. We discovered a purified painkiller, a powerful antibiotic mold, and rare pollen from a distant land, all combined into a sophisticated medicine that rewrites our understanding of ancient science. This was not a simple herbal remedy. It was the secret of the god, a testament to a level of chemistry and global trade we never knew existed 4,000 years ago. And it reminds us with breathtaking clarity that the ancient world is not a puzzle we have solved. It is a story with countless pages still sealed shut, waiting for the right moment to reveal their truths. The sands of Egypt and of history itself are still shifting, guarding wonders beyond our imagination. What other mysteries are waiting, sealed in the sands of time? Let us know in the comments what you think was the true purpose of this jar, and don't forget to subscribe for more adventures into the unknown.